My name is Nupur Sista, and I'm going to talk about the effects of technology on culture through the Andamanese. When thinking over the topic of technological advancements and their impact on cultures, I had initially thought of working with either the Toda tribe of the Nilgiris or the Jarawa tribe of the Andaman Islands, both in India. The Toda tribe with their colorful hand-woven textiles seemed like the obvious choice for a visually rich outcome. However, I wanted to know more about the Jarawas before I made my final decision on the topic. Thus far, I only knew of the Jarawas as I remembered reading about them in the newspapers when reports of the Indian government's decision to build a road through their habitats reserved forest area was having an adverse impact on the Jarawas, and their interaction with people from the mainland increased. They began to learn to beg for food. I wanted to know more about them. As I dove into the research, a whole new world opened up, and I realized that the Jarawas were only one of many tribes on the Andaman Islands of India. And the surviving tribes included the Jarawa, the Onge, the Sentinelli, and the Jangil. Collectively, they were called the Andamanese of Negrito descent, which can be traced back not to Africa, but to Papua New Guinea. Originally, there used to be 10 different tribes on the Andaman Islands. Tucked away in the Bay of Bengal, these tiny cluster of islands of the Andamans have been home to these tribes for an estimated 30,000 to 60,000 years. It's mind-boggling to think that these tribes have lived undisturbed for thousands of years on these islands since a time when the Earth was going through the Ice Age or had Neanderthals around. What piqued my interest was the fact that these were supposedly primitive tribes who had survived and thrived for thousands of years on just their sheer natural intuition for surviving in their natural habitat. Most recently, they had survived the tsunami, probably even sensing its arrival long before the actual catastrophe that left many dead in the mainland areas where the tsunami left its biggest impact. The other thing here was that they were part of India, a country where people in the mainland are prudish about the color of one's skin and nudity. People on the Andaman Islands are dark-complexioned, in fact, so dark that their skin looks almost blue. Several attempts by people who managed to make contact with them to clothe them proved to be initially disastrous, as this led to the tribes contracting infections they had not been exposed to before, since they were unaware of the fact that wearing clothes meant that they must wash them too. I was by now deeply immersed in the study of the Andamanese and began putting together simultaneously the information as I moved forward in the project. I looked over numerous articles, available videos, and in particular one website that helped me to put together a clear perspective on these tribes. This was a website put together as a personal initiative by a Swiss businessman named George Weber on the site named Andaman.org. His site is titled Lonely Islands. It gave me a deeper insight into the ways of living of the Andamanese. Out of all the Andamanese tribes, the Sentinelese continue to be the most elusive, vociferously guarding their habitat on the Sentinel Islands, part of the Andamans. In fact, nobody knows what they call themselves, or whether in fact they call themselves anything at all. They are referred to as the Sentinelese as they live on the Sentinel Islands of the Andaman Islands in India. I now began to put together a mind map that would lead me to the next stage of my exploration on the subject, looking at ways in which to explore the direction of the concept of my message, working through the different ways in which I could create the basis of my concept for the visual communication project. I gathered along the way a list of all the websites that I had accessed when looking up information about these tribes. I was saddened by the reports from a year ago of the last surviving member of the Bo tribe dying. It meant the loss of a language and tribe culture forever.
मेरे बेनों को निशा सारे तो फेटेल मेरे टीवी फिलेल मेरे टीवी ऑटोको जब तक एक लोटेल कोई टाइम अरे यादा हिंदी जाता है अरे
हिंदी आ जाता है
टीवी होटल मुकारा में टीवी जेल टीवी थेलल वो में टीवी जीथिल देखता वो भी वो टीवी खुलाल तो क्या लो वो मैं चीन जीते मैं तो खुम फोरा या किटों को रोजे रैया या किटों को रोजे रैया या किटों को रोजे रैया या
Kami miyamuku karkanate bobingu bite kato mae tomo koto apola
आदूरे गैया लड़ी का दूरे गैया लड़ी का दूरे तोल के डोंगा टोंग लिया वो पे तोल के डोंगा टोंगे जाना तक दुनिया इलाद जाना तक दुनिया इलाद जाना तक दुनिया इलाद जाना तक.
My idea for the campaign emerged from the research where I realized that these tribes are best left in their isolation, good intentions of people from the mainland notwithstanding. The locals from the mainland, domestic tourists visiting the islands, and tourist operators need to be sensitive to their unique culture and heritage and appreciate them instead of treating them like animals in a zoo to be gawked at. I began to conceptualize the campaign, deciding the color palette with blues, greens, and browns. I also looked at using a classic serif type like Garamond as the typeface for the campaign. I began to look at different mediums like ad campaigns. My message was going to mainly focus on building awareness about the fragile nature of these tribes on the brink of extinction from interference with intervention, however well-meaning, and how we need to leave them alone to flourish in an environment where they have survived for 60,000 years. I wanted to extend the campaign to leaflets and posters, which would carry forward the concept of the ad campaign. Given the vast amounts of information that was available on George Webber's website on the Andamanese, for me it seemed like the perfect opportunity to create a book design. I was also considering a website along with an app to complete a well-rounded campaign. What follows is my final campaign with the short time frame from research to completion in 4 weeks. My print campaign is shown here to indicate that it's for a double spread as an advertisement in magazines. I wanted to use a juxtaposition of the old with the new, therefore using an old image consistently on the left of the layout along with a new image on the right of the layout. I combined these elements of imagery with text to complete my message to the audience out there. The target audience would be the general public with a focus on local and international tourists, trying to create an awareness and a sensitivity to the oldest surviving tribes in the world today. I worked on adapting the concept to a series of leaflets, offering smaller bits of information through this medium while maintaining the message. Next in line was the website, which is a vertical format offering a vast array of information along with access to films, information, maps, etc. And finally, the book. What follows are some excerpts from the book. I looked at the book page layouts in stages. While in my research stage, as I put together the information that I gathered, I was already considering the layout, elements, and composition that I would be possibly looking at. Finally, in the end, I settled for a classic, clean-looking layout with images and their descriptors on the left and the text on the right, while keeping the background beige to resemble old parchment paper color. The information available on these tribes was so enormous in volume on the Andaman.org website, it was overwhelming. It has been pieced together painstakingly from old records of past encounters and put together by George Weber, along with the images that I have used here. I decided to use this information as the content of the book. The information dated back to the records by travelers to these islands around the 1500s. The Andamanese are short in stature, being almost pygmoid, at an average of 4 feet 2 inches as their height. They are, however, well proportioned. The Onge tribe was believed to perform a kind of sacrificial ritual where the skulls of women were found with depression built due to pressure of some kind. This is what was believed until anthropologists realized that the depression in the women's skulls in this tribe is caused by long periods of carrying their babies on their back, balanced by a band that runs on their head. Another interesting fact is that these tribes do not know how to make fire. They depend on a lightning bolt that may strike the islands and set fire to the trees. Essentially a hunter-gatherer lot, they hunt all kinds of indigenous wildlife from their islands, their favorite animal being the pig. They are not agriculturists, and several attempts by mainlanders to convert them have failed. They like to eat coconuts, but however do not consider it necessary to sow a coconut seed and wait for the tree to grow. Instead, when taking a census of survivors after the tsunami, the Indian government sent helicopters over the dreaded Sentinel Islands to check for survivors. And sure enough, there they were with their bows and arrows shooting at the helicopter. They were momentarily distracted by the coconut offerings from the visitors, which helped the visitors to take a census. However, as soon as they were done collecting the coconuts, they went back to shooting their arrows, making sure that their visitors beat a hasty retreat. It is ironic how we can, with all our technological prowess, wizardry, progress, and knowledge, wipe out tribes that have lived undisturbed for thousands of years within just a few decades. The last survivor of one of the Andamanese tribes, the Bo tribe, died. Perhaps the same fate awaits the other tribes, unless the people of the mainland learn to understand and appreciate these tribes and their way of living and leave them to live in peace. Thank you for listening.